Glory to God. Good to be in church Sunday morning, last Sunday of April. Great blessing to be with you today. Glad you're here. I don't know if this mic's cutting in and out. Might have to change it. Is it working okay? Sound okay? All right. Glory to God. Psalm 127, let's turn there. Really appreciate your attendance as always and faithfulness in Sunday school classes. A great joy to see you here. Another great day yesterday. God's house, beginning with the morning prayer, 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. We so thank God for everyone coming out and seeking God. Such a big difference is made when God's people pray, and I really do appreciate your heart for that. As we get to Psalm 127 in a moment, I'll have Dana try to pull up for us Ephesians 6, 1 to 4. I want to put that in at our beginning. One of the beginning scriptures we'll read to get things started this morning. Really have enjoyed myself during this time of ministry. Got so many great parents and great input that we've had. I think that a lot of folks have benefited, and we want to keep that going. Let's get Psalm 127 and start it off verses 3 to 5. Who would be our reader for us? Adon, go ahead and take it away. All right. Who would get for us Ephesians 6? I'm going to get 1 through 4 as well. Go ahead, Dave. Take that for us.
Well with you, and you may live long on the earth. And your fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord.
All right, very good. So we want to hold those thoughts in mind as we continue. We were talking last Sunday about both active and passive rebellion, you might recall, and trying to draw some important distinctions between the two. And so we're going to continue on the thought of passive rebellion here in a moment. But first of all, how to know that it's time to chastise. Any child who knowingly or willfully disobeys is in rebellion. There's the key word, is in rebellion and needs chastisement. This is willful
and knowingly disobeying. And we made the caution last week, beware of trying to cure rebellion with creative alternatives. Any alternative to chastisement is an alternative to the Bible, to the Scriptures. So God offers no other solution for the subduing of rebellion outside of His Word than, of course, chastisement. And so we've covered that pretty well. We talked about active rebellion at length, and we were in the middle of talking about passive rebellion when we concluded last Sunday. So I want to keep that train of thought going and keep on that track here. So let me go through the list by way of review, just really touching on consistent forgetfulness qualified as passive rebellion. In other words, common to children is occasional forgetfulness. Consistent forgetfulness, however, is a form of rebellion. Basically, they remember all the things that are important to them, but things that you've, imparted into their life and taught them, they tend to forget. So we have to keep that in mind. All right. External obedience with a bad attitude. I know none of you parents have ever seen any bad attitudes before, but they do exist. Essentially, the kids may cooperate with your directions, but talk, complain, or whine about it. We mentioned the 3-year-old who lets his mother shower him, but is permitted to complain throughout the shower. But I don't want to shower. I don't want to shower. I don't want to shower, right? Well, they're taking it, they're doing it. But you can see by the verbal, the speech there that you've got a problem. All right, obeying only on their own terms is a form of passive rebellion. They do not come exactly when called, or they walk slow, for example. All right, another one is doing what is required, but not how it should be done. Passive rebellion. All right? They do chores, but not by the parents' established standards. We talked about this. The dishes. Oh, they did the dishes, right? How many know the dishes should be completely clean, not just partially clean? Anybody get vexed when you go to the cabinet to get a clean plate, but unfortunately it's not altogether done right. So this is what we're talking about. The bed is made technically, but not properly. All right, the bedroom is not ordered as required. So this is a form of passive rebellion. Okay, it needs to be corrected. There's another one, violating unspoken but understood rules. Although some rules are never spelled out and some behaviors are never specifically prohibited, our children still know better. Okay? They intentionally disregard what they know will please you. What gives them away is when they are caught. The behavior suggests a violated conscience, all right? So if you have little ones, you probably recognize that. There's another one, the toddler who's caught in the bathroom unrolling the toilet paper may not have been specifically forbidden to unroll the toilet paper, but the tears that he sheds and the haste with which he continues his deed as he sees his mother approaching verify that he knows he is doing wrong. All right. Any thoughts on passive rebellion or even active rebellion? I want to just let you know, parent, that you have to be, for this vital task of responsibility of being a parent, you have to be connected with heaven. You need Jesus and His guidance. You need discernment. You need to be praying, God, show me what this behavior is. And God, help me to approach it the right way when I go to correct it, that I'd have a proportionate and right remedy for this. Again, not everything that has to do with passive rebellion. You have to use discretion. The bottom line is that there is a distinction between active and passive. Active, knowingly disobeying, willful conscious disobedience to commands or established rules. And that includes defiant verbal resistance, any sass or talk back. I mean, we're talking about something completely unacceptable. Hitting parents, throwing temper tantrums, We mentioned that toddlers may hold their breath, go stiff, go limp, or cry uncontrollably, fall down and pound their fists on the floor. How many can see that's a difference? These kind of things are different than passive rebellion. This is active. Any aged child may stomp their feet, scream, yell, throw or hit things, stare and glare, slam doors. Active rebellion. Or ignoring instructions. After receiving parental instructions, they continue to do as they please, as if they've never been spoken to. And of course, resisting a parent-initiated action. And we mentioned that if a parent turns the light off, the child shouldn't go immediately behind the parent and turn the light on. So we have active rebellion at work. All right. So let me get a few scriptures here today. Let's get Philippians chapter 2. Any takers? I'm going to get some readers and we'll dig in here. Sheila, Psalms chapter 119. Got Josh on that and got Logan here. He's going to pick up for us. Let's see. Let's get Colossians 3, Logan, if you would, in verse 20. All right. So on the subject of passive rebellion, they cooperate with your directions, but talk, complain, or whine about it. Let's get Philippians chapter 2 and verse number 14 and get further along. Go ahead.
Do all things without complaining and disputing.
Don't you like that simple verse in the Bible? That should apply to every one of us here. And it certainly does. And we have obeying only on their own terms, such as not coming exactly when they're called, walking slowly. How about Psalm 119 and verse number 60? Let's have a reader take that for us.
I made haste and did not delay to keep your commandments.
Don't you like the Bible? What a great verse there for all of us, as we see the psalmist writing about the importance, not just obedience, but quick obedience, prompt obedience. I want to ask if there's any questions about active or passive rebellion. I'm drawing a distinction. Anything that I just went over right now before we move into this next segment? The thing that comes to mind. Going once, going twice. I didn't want to, I purposed in my heart not to rush through these things. I challenge every parent to really analyze things carefully, do your research, do your homework, find out for certain before you bring a discipline, especially something as serious as the rod. Know what you're doing. Always calm, cool, and collected, as we've discussed. This whole chapter has to do with nurturing our children with discipline, loving our children enough to invest into their life with discipline. So we want to do it right, don't we? We know that every time we go to discipline our child, we're communicating a message to them, teaching them, we're instructing them, we're showing them something very important, and we understand how critical it is that we do it right. So all different types of violations, misbehavior, we find all kinds of different scenarios. We wish there was a one-size-fits-all. We wish we had an instruction manual, that the doctor hands us with the DNA of our own child and everything, exactly how we need to do it. We don't get that, do we? We do get the Bible, and we do recognize that we have some clear reference points. Any questions or comments about active or passive rebellion before we move forward? Linda.
Remember Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4? My daughter always used to bring that up to her dad. He makes him mad that she brings up that scripture. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the dad not supposed to get mad for broken childhood or whatever.
Correct.
So she'll use that scripture. When she proposed her dad, she'll use that scripture. But she doesn't get away with it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because she's provoking him to anger, and then she used that scripture. You know what I mean? But it's not going to work that way. Because she wants to keep provoking him. You know what I mean? Because the put it this way. In other words, just like she's trying to control that scripture over him.
Yep, that does take place. That does occur.
That's not going to work.
No, it won't. And good thoughts there. Bottom line is for all of us, as parents, we're setting the example. And there shouldn't be any, anger on our part, any signs of being out of control ever. And that's just part of the authority God has given us. Very, very good. Any other thoughts there? Good. Bennett.
You mentioned something about sending messages. Obviously, we're teaching our children. And something I learned, I wish I had learned early on, was if you don't mean what you're saying, then don't say it. Like, come sit down over here, but then don't enforce it. And say, come sit down over here, and then, follow up on it. They just go wherever. You send them that message that your commands don't really, your instructions and don't really mean much. And so it sends a mixed signal to them.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't say anything to me, when I didn't come sit down that time. So, maybe she won't say anything to me if I don't listen this time. So that message sending is really critical. And like I say, I wish I had learned it sooner. I caught on, but it really, you can really just avoid so much if you do it right away. If you catch that.
Good thoughts.
Right away.
Very good. Coming from experience. Well said.
I was talking to Heather this week about things you see. Everyone has a camera with them, like at all times now, with your phone.
Right.
And I see a lot of, little things posted. My horrible 2-year-old, or it's hashtag toddler life or something. And it's just, instead of disciplining a child, they're taking a picture of it and then posting it for the world to see of their disobedience. And then, like, every kid wants their picture taken. They see that camera come out and they smile, or they straighten their act up, and they all of a sudden, there's the camera, I gotta put on my face. And I just feel like you're reinforcing that bad behavior, instead of dealing with it, you're encouraging it to happen again.
Okay.
And just, the generation has to be cautious of that.
Good observation.
That's the norm now.
Yep. Good observation there. Anybody seen that before? True. Josh?
Enforcing is really important. But I think another good rule of thumb is having, like, before the corporal punishment, having it all so well defined. Like, instead of like reaching for the spoon or whatever you're using, like all of a sudden, or I know we're talking about the emotions, but I'm talking about in the long term, like the rules of the house. So that's what I'm talking about. So, so having it all well defined in the beginning, or over time, you're teaching them before all the emotions come up. But while in the normal routines of life, you're telling them, you're not to do this, you are to do this.
Good.
And so it's not like at this critical moment when but you hadn't really defined it yet.
Yep.
But now you're angry, they're tantrum, and so now, but if you have it defined, then for one you can kind of now lean back on that foundation and be even keeled about the punishment, and then when you execute the judgment, that kid now understands that it was them. Many times we've already had it defined. Sometimes we haven't, but many times I found that many times when we've already had it defined and they've already understood, and then boom, the pain comes. Afterwards, we're not even, instructing them to apologize. They're already going up to all the people they've sinned against, and they're already apologizing because they already knew that the rule was broken by them, and then the judgment.
Yes.
Very good. I think Josh points to a very important responsibility that parents have as far as making sure things are clear and well defined, and that's a point we can't emphasize enough, can we? That's so important for a parent going to initiate discipline. Wait a minute. Has everything been well established? And so good input there. We had another hand? Adon.
I was going to say that it helps a lot sometimes, like Josh was saying, begin to set up a standard. But what I have caught myself, particularly with the younger ones, that we have forgotten that it's 5 years in between the older ones, is that to the older ones we told them before we get off the car, if you misbehaving, but a lot of people think it's just automatically happening because we talk to them. We emphasize the rule at the house and we compare it. You behave in the house, you will behave in church. And then we bring it to the point of, okay, we saw that being wrong in the church. Now we're going to go and fix it at the house because you don't behave like that at the house.
Yeah, yeah.
So the discipline doesn't start at the church or at the shopping center or the school. It starts at home. And so setting up that example, or that standard, like Josh was saying, is very crucial because now they know they have no excuse, and when they're going to be corrected, they know why. But you have to be forceful on what the standard is at home.
All right, very good. So we have some good thoughts there on this subject, and I want to go on to the thought of responding to rebellion with threats, the danger of threatening to spank. Children must learn early on that it is the authority of a parent's word, which they must heed, and that spankings will always be merited by willful defiance of that word. The parent who makes that clear to a young child and then proceeds throughout their childhood to regularly warn of each impending spank accidentally sends the message that their word is not to be taken seriously. So we touched on that thought. Their warnings may succeed in curtailing immediate misbehavior, but their child will learn to disrespect their word. And if they disrespect the parent's word, they disrespect their parent. Parents usually offer these warnings because they hope to correct rebellion without resorting to spanking. However, the child who is asserting his will against his parents is already in need of chastisement. The constant threats and reminders of impending spankings are blatant efforts to persuade a child to cease from misbehavior. And of course, that will not subdue the will. Everybody understand that? All right, so how to identify thoughtless disobedience? We touched on that term, thoughtless disobedience. Let me give you 4 thoughts regarding thoughtless disobedience. It's any accidental violation of a rule or parental command. Accidental violation of a rule or parental command. It is not willful or defiant, nor is it planned or premeditated. It is typically a thoughtless, impulsive, careless, or irresponsible action. It could even be an honest mistake. Could our kids make an honest mistake? They could. It's an action which merits correction and a punitive consequence. All right, so let's talk about discipline for thoughtless disobedience for a moment. The most effective disciplines for acts of thoughtless disobedience are those in which the penalty is related to the crime. In this way, the consequence reinforces the lesson that needs to be learned. All right, less effective disciplines are those which have nothing to do with the misdeed. When a child thoughtlessly leaves his bike out for the second time, what will teach him to be more responsible with his possessions? Will grounding him? Everybody see it's not quite congruent, it's not quite connected there. Will that teach him to put his bike away? Time out? Sitting in a corner? Fining him? Assigning him 10 pages of sentences? Right? None of these will be as effective as creating a consequence which relates directly to his failure. The child who leaves his bike out has proven himself irresponsible with a personal possession. He needs to learn responsibility. All right? That's what he needs to learn. The consequence which might teach him to be more responsible with his bike would be the loss of his bike for a period of time. So this isn't rocket science, is it? But you can see the connection that's obvious. It's very obvious there. Every time he wants to use it but can't, he is reminded of his need to be more responsible with his bike. And let's add to this, he and not mom will need to spend time removing the rust from the bike frame, which resulted from leaving the bike out in the evening dew. So you get the point there. Have you ever seen thoughtless disobedience in your child? Ever seen accidental misbehavior? Is there such a term? Some of you might be skeptical. I mean, kids do things because, just like us, we're human and we make mistakes. Maybe they did not intend to break that lamp, but they did. I mean, they you know, maybe it was sitting on the edge of the table, and it wasn't usually in its usual place in the middle of the table, now it's on the edge, and they just weren't looking, and they had no intention of what they would not want to break the lamp, but they swung around with their elbow on accident, and there it went. And an unwise parent would jump up and, you know, okay, look, you broke the lamp, that's the rod. I hope we're all on the same page here. Careful, parents. All right, we don't say, well, I paid $200 for that lamp, so you know what? That's active rebellion. Everybody catch me here? Man, I hope we're on the same page. Well, that means so much to me, so it has to be active rebellion. No, it's not. A lot of parents make mistakes here. And I really do want to caution everyone to really step back. Don't be reactionary to say, okay, what's happening here? What just took place? If you don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's active rebellion, I'd be careful about the rod. When I've used the rod as a dad, it's because I know. I have no doubt. There's no lack of clarity. Okay, it's verified and confirmed with solid evidence. Some of you are asking, how do you verify? Solid evidence. Give us some examples. I'm not giving you any examples. Tell us who it was, but I'm not giving you that. You get the drift, though. A lot of times it's because I walked in and there it was. They're right in the middle of doing it after I said, all right. So, you know, you get the idea. But I really do want to draw a distinction and let everybody know not everything warrants the rod. The rod is the last resort. It's the last thing we want to do, and it's the last thing we do. But we will do it because it's necessary in some cases. All right, any thoughts or questions about this? I don't want to move too fast right here. Kenya, go ahead.
So in that like situation, what would you do?
They're going to clean it up, that's for sure. And they may even, depending on exact circumstances, they may even be involved in helping replace it.
Oh.
Yeah, you know, whether that's doing something extra to earn, you know, whatever the case may be. It depends on the circumstances. Okay, let me just clarify that. I don't.
Pastor, I was gonna give an example.
Yeah.
So I think I was about 2-3 years old, Isaiah, and I bought my wife this this big clock from Europe. I was in Europe, and it happened to be the sale at the right time, in the right place, and everything.
Uh-oh.
So I bought it. They shipped it. It took about almost a year to come, but it came, and you know, we enjoyed it. And we're in the move. I'm not sure which move was, but in the move to Pioneering or through Pioneering. We had a phone, and it was actually my fault because I put the phone in the wrong place. And I happened to be jumping onto the corner, and the phone would fall right in the middle of the glass. And up to today, I can't find the glass. But I couldn't punish him because I knew it was an accident.
Yeah.
Even though it's precious, it meant a lot. But we couldn't do anything. So. And looking at the whole thing, like you say, analyze was it on purpose, or what was the cause? Why did the phone fall first of all?
Yeah.
On it? And so the whole thing is, you can't say that was precious to me. It took me a whole year to get it. It cost me $500. I couldn't go to the Lowe's. I only had to buy the bullet, and I couldn't even have him help me clean it because it's glass.
Yeah.
So all those things are in place.
Yeah, and more valuable than any material possession we have, right, Church, is the fact that we handle it right with our kids. We leave that right example with them that they'll remember. So good thought there. I saw him in the back, Debbie, or the side. Gio, you guys go ahead.
I have a question. What if, this happened this morning. I was getting my
man.
boys ready, and I was getting myself ready too, so they were fighting over a toy. Good thing they had both of the same, so I told the older one, okay, you play with this and this one play with this. But there were toys inside, so the little one wanted the toys inside, but the older one was playing with it first, so I was kind of like, oh man. But then the older one wasn't really crying, so I just gave it to the little one. And around, the older one started throwing stuff behind my back. And the only reason why I knew was because it was clean, but then I looked at it like, so I didn't know what to do. I knew I was supposed to spank it, but I was like, okay, it's time to go to church. I don't want no tear. Let's just get on with it. And then the other thing was, he's a boy, and I am really trying my best to discipline him as far as you do not touch a woman, no matter what. How do I define that? What if it was not his fault? Because if he hit a girl, I would spank him. I don't care if it was your fault or not. Can you help me? What do I do there? Do I do an investigation of seeing what happened? I mean, they're like 2 years old. I don't know. What do I do? It's like I need help there because I don't want him to grow up thinking that it's okay to hit a lady, but at the same time, I don't want him to be like not defending himself and kind of like, because I was reading a book about adoption, and it talked about how it's okay to tell the boy to tell them no or don't do this, because sometimes boys get to be like so, you know, in that book at least they was talking about that, is, you know, it's okay for boys to have a boundary to say no or don't do this or whatever. So I don't know, it's like, what do I do? Like,
Yeah.
I want to just spank him.
Man, Gio, I can always count on you, right, to really insert the challenge for us here. No, that's good questions, and I'm with you on the thought of a boy not hitting a girl. I'm with you 100% on that. And the bottom line is, of course, you know, no girl should be allowed to hit a boy either. You know, it's both ways. But in that scenario, you know, they need to be able to you know, walk away from that situation and tell someone that the girl's misbehaving, you know, and so forth. But the short answer to your question, and especially your first one, is call Mama Coco, because she has all the answers. A woman of God that's a real godly mom to help you out with that. You can tell I'm trying to squirt my way. No, the bottom line is, it sounds like that both of them were crossing the line a little bit in their behavior, so they probably lose the privilege of the toys altogether. There's the short answer. And so, but good questions. There needs to be some consequence, you know, for misbehavior. And I'm glad you brought up the thought, though, of you know, the girl hitting the boy and boy's response. I totally agree that a boy should not be hitting a girl. And so we want to emphasize that. Hope that helps. All right. Who else? We'll move too fast here. Ivana, go ahead.
I just have to respond to you.
Yeah, go ahead. I appreciate that. Help us.
For me and Josh, all of our kids, that they should keep their hands to themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
Neither one of them should be touching each other. And when you resort to violence, you're wrong, no matter what your reasons are for. And then, two, even if it's before church, it's what we've been talking about all along. If they committed the act, it needs to be addressed right there and right then and there.
Yep.
No matter what's happening, because if you continue to just ignore it, then they're just going to keep running circles around you and taking advantage of you because they're not going to take you seriously, and they're just, you know. So to me, if the crime happens, it needs to be addressed right away, if it's possible. You know what I mean? If you're
good,
you can handle it. But other than that, what I was going to say is that, and I know Don and Kathy will mind me sharing this too, was I had Bible studies at our home, and it was Natalie, one of the twins, and Caleb. They pushed a table, which is one of our school tables. They pushed a school table by the bed and decided that they all wanted to jump off the table. And in the process, they ended up breaking the table or bending it. It was still usable. It was something that we could use. But I had to scold all of them, and I didn't get upset in a way where I went off on them, but I said, you guys should have not been doing that. And then I told them, each of you are going to pay to replace this table. Even though it was still usable, I said, you both, all three of you will pay.
Yep.
And they were sad and they were hurt about getting in trouble. But one thing I noticed is when they all, you know, finally came and brought their money to me, it was like they were proud that they could be able to help in that way. It kind of taught them character, like, okay, I broke something, so I need to replace it. Yeah. And I think I saw in each of the kids that they were just blessed that they could do that they could go and just be like, okay, I'm gonna give you money because I broke something. And so I was just glad that I didn't overreact, but I just told them, like, you're gonna give me $5 each, and they did. All three of them paid up.
Hey.
And they brought up for it. So
testimony from Rhonda there, and I so appreciate anyone emphasizing the importance that we've talked about of prompt response to misbehavior. Get right on it, not letting time pass. So good thoughts there, Rhonda. All right, I want to talk about a few typical punishments and principles to consider here. Number one, loss of privileges, right? Parents must realize that most of what their children are allowed to do or to have is a privilege. Let me stop right there. Does everybody understand what a privilege is? What's the definition of privilege? Who's Webstered me today? I see Jared on the front row. I know. Anybody have a working definition of privilege? I want to stop on that thought for a moment. What is a privilege? Most of what our kids have is a privilege. Sheila, take a stab at it.
An extra, not a right.
Okay, let's just put it at that, right? Not a right. Not a right. Privileges should be revoked for those who prove themselves irresponsible. It is very important that children be told in advance the possible discipline they will bring upon themselves. As parents, that goes back to we talked about our responsibility, our part of clarifying things. Any questions on that? Right there, Kendra, go ahead.
So, you know how we're not supposed to threaten them? When do you tell them about the repercussions of their actions? Like, because do you start off the day and tell them? Of course, you know, over time you have to teach them the things that you want set in stone. But when do you tell them, like, that they're not going to have their privileges? Because I feel like when you are going to tell them, it's at that point already where they're acting out or they're doing what they're not supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this for certain, that if it's a first-time offense, and I have some questions as to whether this has been clarified to them, I'm not going to the rod, and I'm going to go ahead and go with the warning. And I encourage every parent to do that as well, because you want to establish clearly, and you want it to be understood. You know, and take time. Don't just rush it, you know, quit blurting it out, but just take time sitting down and explain that, you know, if they're of age to receive that. But second time offense, then we have a different story. You know, the bottom line is it's already been clearly clarified. But I am for warnings on first time offense, especially when there's a lack of clarity. Right? Other hand? Slav, I'll come back to you.
I think another definition, there is allowed access based on trust, right, for privilege. You know, and if they're trustworthy in other areas, you could increase their privilege, or you could, you know, take the privilege away. I think that teaches something.
All right, that's important. Good thought there, Marcus.
So, like, what I'm thinking is like, because if you tell a child something, right, and at what age? So like, for instance, say like, I want her to be able to respond, yes, mommy, no, mommy. She doesn't do that a lot, because I think it's because we talk to each other.
And how old is she now?
But it's like, we told her this, but it's like, I don't know if she just forgets. So it's kind of like, you know, what's the best way to do that? And it doesn't seem like rebellion. It's just like, I don't know. It's something that I want her to do, but I don't want to have to like bring the hammer down every time she doesn't do it. You know, so we remind her often, but it's like she still doesn't really, you know, do it all the time.
Yeah. Well, for right now, for sure, Marcus, I know you can well enough to know you pray, and you ask God for wisdom and direction, because ultimately, no one else but you guys, you know, really can identify the appropriate, you know, consequence. That age is tender still, you know, learning how they are, their capacity, I mean, it's certainly of age for discipline, there's no question about that, but the bottom line is, you know, every child develops at a different pace too, and we take that into consideration. We talked a little bit about that, you know. So I don't want to overstep my bounds, you know. Say, get the rod out, Marcus, time to go. No, I'm not doing that, you know. you be sensitive regarding what the misconduct is. You mentioned, I think, just a moment ago that you don't think it's something that's purposely, rebellious in that sense, and so, approach that cautiously. And this stage sounds like you just keep working to develop that strong relationship and communication, and clarifying things. You'll know, I think all parents do, when it's defiant rebellion, you can pick it up immediately. And, then of course the rod is merited. But at this stage, keep praying daily for that clarity, Marcus. But when it's misbehavior and when it's something you've dealt with before, it's happened again, you need to be prompt. It needs to be a consequence. It needs to be proportional. That's the bottom line. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be proportional to what the crime was. If she left the toys out, for example, then the loss of toys, after you've told her that it shouldn't be left out, then the loss of that privilege would be warranted. But again, Marcus, I just want to emphasize that we take everything into consideration. And I really mean that we start with prayer, and then we watch carefully, and we don't jump in reaction. John.
Yeah, I'm just going to share in response to what Marcus was saying that, yeah, it does require the constant reminders, because at first it seemed like Batman didn't really respond like that. But what I would encourage you to do is also make sure you tell him to say yes, Daddy, because now when I say stuff, and then I'm like, hey, you got to respond, and he says, yes, Mommy, and I'm like, no. You want to also throw in there, yes, Daddy. There's a balance between the parents. So now it's always.
There you go. Yeah, and we're looking for it to be genuine, yes, Daddy, and a genuine yes, Mommy, and so that just requires our time and our effort and our attention. And I applaud you, parents. These aren't easy things, So very, very good. You can come over to Logan here.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how with Liam, we kind of tell him beforehand when we're getting into our day, when we're coming to church, what we're kind of perceiving that he's going to be, I guess, expecting, like going to children's church. Like, all right, son, we're gonna listen, we're gonna obey, we're gonna respect the teachers, and so he kind of has it in him, knowing what to expect. All right, then okay, let's just go ahead and just see what happens, and then give the consequences after. It's just a matter of constantly instilling them, and it's been a routine where we pray before going into children's church, and it's a blessing for him, it's a blessing for us because we haven't heard any questions yet. But he's been good with that, and even with addressing aunties and uncles. If we, like even myself, I forget to say auntie or uncle, but my wife would both say Carol or uncle, and she'll remember to always have that instilled in them, or uncle and auntie and submit for his matters. Yeah, so he's pretty good with that as long as we set him up. But I know that there's instances that we're not always foreseeing the whole entire day where we're going, and it's like you can't always catch that to instill in him. But for the most part, I would think that with those little steps, with that he'll know what to expect when we're in these situations. But still, it's on us to prepare him for what's to come today.
All right, and Logan touched on something. What he said is good input there about children addressing adults, right? We were heading in that direction, but since he touched on it, I can't help but to share the thoughts that we have there. For children, it is right that they address adults with Mr. or Mrs.
Yes.
Auntie and uncle, be appropriate, on the island. I think that's completely fine. But just a blatant first name, how about we work on that? Straight 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Bob, how you doing? Something about that. Right? Well, I'm serious. I really do ask, that we try, as parents, and all the way up until they're the adults themselves is my rule of thought. If they become adults themselves, they can address an adult by their first name. Okay, I got a slew of hands going on here. I'm going to go with Dave. I haven't talked to him yet, so go ahead.
The whole thing about Mr. and Mrs. To this day, some of the friends I grew up with, I still call their parents Mr.
Okay. Right. And there's 60s, probably 70s, and it was like, okay. And nothing wrong with that. the bottom line is I'd rather err on the side of being respectful, right,
Yes.
than anything else. And so,
Yeah.
Sheila, go ahead.
You know, my kids grew up with the green kids, you know, back and forth a lot. And as my kids got older, Bob told them, you don't have to call me Mr. Bob anymore. You know, they're older.
Okay.
It was his, they couldn't.
They couldn't do it, yeah.
Still
Yeah.
Mr. Bob, you know, and he's been gone 4 years, but he'll always be Mr. Bob.
Yeah.
You know, it's just ingrained in them to have that
Yes.
respect.
I love it. What can you say? You know, it's tremendous. Dave, go ahead.
Back to that accidental kind of disobedience. Sometimes we forget as parents that they're still children. Their brains are still, you know, working things out, figuring things out, and they're very curious. They like to try things. One time, we had some guests over, some visitors that just happened to pop by, and the young woman was wearing a very nice skirt, and she was standing up, and my son, who was maybe 2, he plowed right through her, just like, and we you know, so embarrassed. What are you doing? Why did you run her over? And you know, we come to find out that he saw a space, you know, within her skirt. I guess the light was shining behind her skirt, and he saw a place where he could crawl through, and he wanted to. Yeah, he just thought it was that would be. He was like 2 or 3, maybe 3, maybe John's age, something like that. And he just thought that was the coolest thing. He just, like a cave, you know, he just wanted to see what it would be like to go through there. And, you know, from the outside, it looked like he just wanted to run her over, you know. And
right.
So we have to be mindful of, and I know, Gio, I'm not prophesying over you, but I know John's going to take stuff apart. Because he's very curious. And you're going to walk in the room someday, and there's going to be your radio or something all over the place.
No, that's a great point, though.
Yeah,
and I would say that to Marcus too.
Yeah,
that's
yeah. The children
really,
are
really
naturally, they're trying to figure this world out.
Yeah.
And sometimes they act on they have these impulses, they just act on them, and it's not intentionally disobedient. And you know, it's fairly obvious when that happens, but when your son plows a woman over, it's not. It wasn't obvious at that moment, so you know, just be mindful.
Good input. I want to hold that thought. Yeah, I really want to emphasize, parents, we do err on the side of grace. We do, and good example of Dana points that we have to close it out. Good thoughts there, everybody. Let's bow our heads and pray. Give you time for fellowship and coffee. Glory to God. Be back in at 2 minutes till 10, so we can have a full attendance for our song service, worshiping Jesus. Let's pray and ask God to bless this time of fellowship. Very grateful for God's hand upon us. Just thank Him today for His goodness. Tyrone, we pray for us.
God, we just thank you for this lesson. God, we thank you for your word. All of the input, Father, all of the just wisdom. I just pray for every parent in this place, God, that you would help us, God, to have discernment in these areas. God, help us to just pour out grace, pour out love over our children, God, as we bring discipline. I pray you would even help our kids, God, to understand what we're trying to do here, that your spirit would be all over what we're trying to do. We just give you thanks. We praise you in Jesus' name.